Welcome to your lunch hour with the Entrepreneur's Journey Live. I'm Natalie Fairchild, and this is my co-host, Martin Noches. How's it going, Martin?
Hello, pretty good. How are you?
Good, good. We had the sun this last week and feeling a little the allergies. So I hope everybody's doing good. But anyway, I'm so excited for this topic. So, first quarter uncertainty and it being an election year.
It,
So,
it
l-
happens.
it happens. All kinds of stuff happens, right?
Yep.
So first quarter uncertainty. I've heard from a lot of people just talking about business, real and raw. It's been a little flat, a little, some people say really slow for them. First quarter for us is normally our slowest one, but I would like to see it even more strong. Um, what kinds of things are you hearing?
Well, you know what? This is an interesting one for me because I've been doing this in different forms for about 22 years almost. And Q1 is always so funky. There's,
Always.
I don't think there's ever been a Q1 in my experience that people were not having some level of conversation of like, this stuff's a little weird, or, it's slower than usual, or, we can't seem to hit the rhythm. There's just always some sort of stuff going on in Q1 for people.
Yeah. So do you think that we forget and then we come back to Q1 and go, gosh, I just don't remember it being like this.
Yeah, well, isn't that the human nature,
Well,
right?
it's our mind's way of protecting us, right? So we're like,
Exactly. I mean,
yeah.
you forget all of the things, right? You also forget the random record day you had in that Q1 in X year because that just doesn't register, right? Doesn't create some sort of pattern that people can recognize. And then you start hearing it from everyone.
Right.
You
That
start
just kind of,
hearing it
oh,
and
yeah, it
oh,
is.
right,
Yeah.
yeah, no, it is weird. People are being weird this Q1.
But a
And
lot of us track our numbers, so we track our
hopefully,
numbers based on last year. And it looks a little less like we had been used to, beating records year after year, month after month. And then it kind of feels a little like, oh, we're stretching to get there.
yeah, maybe so. And I don't want to call you out too much, right? But the things you track are different, right?
We're tracking revenue
You track
and the
revenue
number
and
of
you track,
carts we do.
right? And sometimes those two things may not be completely aligned. And yeah, there's something to be said about the environment, right? There's a certain Q1 something, and we'll talk about what that something is. But then there's also your response to it.
Mhm.
For me, the reason Q1 is something identifiable as something as a weird moment or a tough moment for businesses is
Mhm.
because it's a combination of things. Yes, there are inherent things that happen in Q1. I mean, consumer spending declines in the middle of January. Everybody knows that, right? But then there's what we bring to our own business around Q1, which usually starts in Q4 of the previous year. I don't know about you, but for most businesses I know, unless they're like seasonal specific, everybody seems to take their foot off the gas around December 15th, right? And there's this like, oh, well, it's the holidays. And then when you come back after January 2nd, there's like a momentum that's been lost. Right?
Yeah,
There's just we have to restart the machine, right? We have to restart the engine, and that takes time.
right. Right.
So
So there's a
that's
gal there's a
yeah,
gal
that's an
in
example.
Denver I was talking to, and she does marketing, websites, the SEO, branding, graphic design. And she said in January, she had about 10 proposals, and she has a great close rate for proposals.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden, she she was like not she got 1 out of 10. And she was like, "What the
Mhm.
heck is going on?" And they all came back with price, it's just coming down to the money, the money, the money. And I talked to her probably 2 or 3 weeks ago. I asked her how things are going now, and she said, "Fine." But it shook her as well. She's like, "What, this is how I'm starting my year." Then you start to take that on,
Yeah.
and that's a load. So, I don't are we seeing price more of an issue? Is a question, because I know that, people have had to raise their prices. So are we getting some reaction to that? Um, and everything is costing more, and, that kind of thing. Do you think that there's something to be said about that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, and this is another one of those places where, again, if you look at, depending on where you're looking, you're gonna get different news, right? But if you're looking at consumer spending, for instance, it's always there's always a slowdown in consumer spending because Q4 is so consumer spending heavy,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
So
Right.
people have to recover, right? So
Right.
businesses tend to have the same logic only because businesses are chock full of people, and the people have their personal habits really influence the way they conduct their business. About 90% of businesses have calendar fiscal years as well, right? So they have that. Well, we closed out December, and now we
Mhm.
start over. Okay, that's
Mhm.
arbitrary.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
when we
Okay.
start the year is arbitrary. So
Yeah.
yeah, there are effects that are direct to the cost of things, right? And businesses need to know how to adapt to those. What you shouldn't do is you shouldn't read into that there's something mm, outside of it that is affecting your business, right? If there's a specific thing you must buy to sell, to resell in your business, and that specific thing has increased in price and cost for you, there's places you need to look inside to adapt to that.
Mhm. Mhm.
But
Yeah.
you shouldn't up your pricing because milk is a little more expensive in the grocery store.
Yeah.
Like, that there should be an actual correlation.
Right. So I'm hearing that, the first quarter, January, typically slower, which I would say the same in the years I've been in business. However, don't you I mean, I know I see the number reflection in both number of events and our gross and net profit. Um, and I'm hearing it from other people. So what
Yep.
else is going on? Something's going on.
Yeah. So whenever I talk to people about this and conversation goes to economics and things like that, I always say that in Main Street business, right? We're not talking about Goldman Sachs. We're not talking about people who trade in economic scales.
Right.
We're talking about, you know, mom and pop, Main Street, family owned, etc. Um, when it comes to those businesses, the uncertainty of it all has probably a bigger effect than the actual economic metrics that are out there.
So you're
Right? Like,
saying it
they're
affects
not
us
known.
mentally.
Yes. Look, I have a lot of clients who need to invest in their businesses. They need to, you know, take on a new line of credit. They need to invest in equipment. They need to hire more people because it's obvious, right? We're looking at down the roadway at we're going to double our need, right? We're going to double the amount of projects we're going to get involved in. So we know that we should hire because we need to train, we need to develop, but they are really, really hesitant on doing so.
Right. I'm one of them. Like, I get it.
They just don't want to do
It's
it.
like, "Martin, you don't understand."
And then I have the conversation. I said, okay, fine. Let's just assume that you don't want to do this in Q1 because of this. So what you're saying to me is that all of those projects and all of those growth mechanisms that we have slotted for Q2, we're just going to defer them, right? We're just going to push them out into maybe Q3 because now we're doing the hiring and the investing and the developing during Q2, which
Right.
is when we were supposed to be delivering that.
Right.
Right.
And
So,
don't
so now you're going to have a slow Q2 as well.
yeah. Yeah, I get that. And don't big companies like Intel and things, like when the economy is down, that's when they spend most of their money and infrastructure and building and
Ah,
expanding.
that's such a good question. Uh, so
Thanks.
you gotta think about, and I think I said it the other day in the other show when with Shula. You gotta think about who's delivering the message to you.
Yeah, right.
What is it that they're saying, and in
Mhm.
order for you to think and do what, right? You see, real investors, right? People who sit and speculate on the market, they sit back and they only invest or they mainly invest in times of high uncertainty, in times of, you know, complete consumer distrust, right? Because
Yeah.
everybody's holding back.
Yeah.
There's no inventory. They can pick up everything they want cheap,
Right. Right.
right? So yeah, there's somebody who benefits from all of this uh, trigger shyness, uncertainty in small businesses and in consumers. But I don't want to get too weirdly
Yeah.
political about
Yeah.
that. But there's somebody who will benefit from the empty space, right? That all of that non-investment leaves,
Right. For
and
sure. I
and
did
that's
a ton of
problematic.
traveling in 21 and 22, and I mean, I went to New York a couple different times for 198 round trip and I mean, all kinds of things, you
Because
know?
nobody
It was
was doing
great.
it. Right?
It was
Yeah.
great. It was great. Yeah. Well, let's bring Candace in, our producer, and talk about a few questions that have been popping up because I want to get what other people are saying besides me with business first quarter. Thanks for
All
being here.
right. Hey guys, you guys got a lot of questions. You put out the what's your thoughts on Q1 bat signal, and we got some thoughts. Got some thoughts.
Nice.
So jumping right into the beginning of Q1, we're gonna tackle the post-holiday blues that Martin alluded to. So somebody asked the question, making the business decision in December to tackle that issue or get to that task next year is usually a logical and necessary move, and quite frankly feels amazing. However, I find them in Q1 is always off to a rocky start with the laundry list of undesirable tasks waiting for me, which is on
Mhm.
top of the usual Q1 stuff that needs to be done. What is your guys' approach to offloading December into January without overwhelming my Q1?
What do
Yeah.
you think, Nat?
Well, a couple things I think is one thing that we do because we know that January is our slowest month is we do a once a year coupon that is a big discount. It only happens once a year and we promote it throughout November, December for just the month of January. So we get that going. Um and then and then we try and relax into January and do the very best we can and we look at it we all say okay guys these are all from our planning meetings this is all the projects and things that we wanted to get done in first quarter now we have a little bit more time let's get them done so it allows for more concentration on different projects that are just as important that you can't get done in December because it's all hands on deck in December.
Yep.
So that's what we do. So typically we know historically, again, what January is going to be, and we try and relax into it, be as proactive as we can, and get as much crap done, big projects, and work on stuff to move us forward.
I love your answer because there's three elements to it that I think everybody should pick up. The first one is the intentionality of it all,
Hmm.
right? You see, is one thing to stumble into first quarter going like, oh shit, everybody's hungover from not doing any real work for the last 2 weeks of December, and now we have to do all this stuff, right? Like versus saying, look, December's gonna be busy, at least the first 2 weeks, right? Maybe a little more, and there's gonna be stuff piled on for us in January. But we know that. We all talked about it. We created a plan for it.
Yeah.
Then the
Yeah.
second thing you said is, okay, well, then, we still need to pay bills, right? We need to survive. So you proactively promote something to create a buzz, create some level of business, even though you still know that's going to be tough, right? It's going to be consumer doubt, and it's going to be
Mhm.
nobody's really getting in the mood of spending a bunch of money in January.
Mhm.
So you want to try to build that up. You make it,
Right.
you create a discount that's probably very effective at keeping the relationship active, somebody keeping their space and working with you. And then the third thing you do, which is sort of, it goes hand in hand with the first, which is, if you're being intentional about how January is going to be both slow and with a backlog of stuff, that's when we create actual planning. That's when we create. Most of my clients, we plan in January. We don't plan in December.
Mhm.
We
I
don't plan in
used to do
November.
that. I
Most of
used
my
to do
clients
that.
plan in January.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wonder if, we will go back to that because you really don't have all your numbers until the year is done.
That's
And
part of it. Yeah, that's
yeah.
one of the reasons I don't plan in December, right? Because if
Yeah.
we're going to plan to beat last year, we need to know where last year ended.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, I really constantly talk about how all of those limits are arbitrary.
Mhm.
Like it's kind of similar to the relationship people have with what do you call that? New Year's resolutions. It's
Yeah.
BS, right? It's like,
Yeah.
well, if you want to exercise, why don't you just exercise? Why do you need to wait till January 1 to be like, I'm gonna exercise, right? Like if that's the thing you want to do and you're committing to it, why don't you just do it,
Yeah.
right? Your gyms will
Yeah.
be cheaper and more available in December. But the thing
Yeah.
is, they just won't, right? That like we have this traditional approach to the year ending
Mhm.
in the year beginning. And I think that has a lot to do with the Q1 malaise.
Well, and then there's the hibernation time of winter. And you feel that. And you feel like you should be coming in January 2nd. Okay, let's go. But this is a little bit more of a heart conversation. But our bodies are like, it's hibernation time and that kind of thing. I know I always joke that I think I have sundowners because, it starts getting dark at 4:30 and I'm like, "Woo!" I mean, I get the most sleep in the winter because I'm I'm going to bed early. I have a little less life in me during the winter. So there's that too. And trying to give yourself some grace, but just trying to keep moving the ball forward. I think is
Look,
important.
we're animals. We're still biological, right? So there are effects to all of those things.
Yeah.
I not to be controversial, but there's a lot of European countries who have figured that out, right? There's a
Yeah.
lot of European countries that have the reduced hours during the winter times.
Mhm.
They have granted, there's some places where there's no sun, right? So that makes it
Right.
easier to make that kind of leap. But they at least put some of their operational effort towards understanding and applying the concept of, okay, well, humans are going to still have to do this work, right? And if they're
Right.
not in their prime, it's not going to be as good as it could be, right?
Right.
So, in that sense, I would be more, if we need a beginning of the year, the beginning of the year should be closer to where we are right now,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like this is where people are coming out of that, because the actual winter is ending.
Yeah.
And now there's like a bit of a different feel to it all, right? So
There's hope in the air.
let's say that, yes.
Yeah.
I've always set my New Year's resolutions for the first day of spring.
There you go.
Really?
Every year, I'm in hibernation mode. The first day of spring
See?
is like personal resolutions. I've always done the first day of spring is when all of that
I
starts.
love that.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm popping in because you guys are touching on something we got a lot of questions about,
Yeah.
which is goal setting resolutions. So I feel like this question sort of encapsulates all of them, which is how do both of you recommend business owners tackle yearly goal setting and resolutions? I do the exercise with myself and my staff every January, and it always feels like more of a black cloud over my head than a motivator. Thoughts on that?
I'm kind of wondering if you can do part of your planning in November-ish, kind of where we normally do it, like a the SWOT analysis, the 30,000, foot view of things. Um, the big things that you want to kind of really brainstorm on and work on in January, so that you don't feel like you're just bombarded, because those planning meetings, especially for the leader of the company, and this is just me personally, but can be so overwhelming.
Mhm.
It can be very overwhelming. Um, yeah. So that's my thought. What about you, Martin?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. My take and my approach to my clients is, why are we doing planning only once in a year?
Yeah.
Right? If we are creating any level of that, I mean, that is pretty similar to what people used to do back in the day, where they showed up to their accountants around tax time with a box of receipts and be like, how did I do? How did I do last year? Did we make money? Right? Because they didn't know. Right? They
Yeah.
literally didn't know. They had been going through the emotions. So the equivalent of that nowadays is, we plan once a year, right? We go into the end of the year and we go, well, how did we do? Right? We look at the year and go, let's do better next year. Right? Th- That has an effect, because that has an effect, right? I'd rather you do that than nothing at all. I'd rather
Right.
you actually look at the numbers and be, how do we get better? You already have a lot of the battle won when you're doing that. Okay, don't get me wrong. But I very much rather say, hey, since we're measuring shit around here, why don't we measure it quarterly? Why don't we measure it monthly and have discussions and adaptations around the plan monthly, quarterly, etc. Right? So that's why I usually suggest that my clients do an evaluation of the year around the mid to late Q4, and they're planning on early Q1. Right? Their planning is going to include, what are we doing, right?
Mhm.
What are the projects, goals? And again, goals for me is a little bit of a loaded word. I actually prefer outcomes,
Mm.
because outcomes are measurable and they're usually composed of a lot of tasks and activities that lead you to an outcome. A
Mm.
goal is something like that you accomplish or don't. I'd
Yeah.
rather you tell me that I'm 75% of my outcome than
Mm.
yay
I
or
like
nay
that.
on a goal, right? So just as a side note, but the goal setting or the planning that needs to go into a business, I would honestly try to disassociate it as much as you can with the quarter, where everybody associates the most, either the most distractedness and the most uncertainty. Right? You're talking about Q4. There's some companies that after Thanksgiving, everybody's checked out,
Peace out. Yeah. Yeah.
and
For sure.
and in Q1, everybody's malaced and weird and etc. Right?
Mhm.
So you're literally saying that all of your planning happens in either one of those two. I'm
Mhm.
saying that's maybe not the best approach, right?
Mhm.
Maybe
Yeah.
create an ongoing planning
Yeah.
approach.
What we have done, and we feel like works good, because we have a lot of strategists in our group and we want to really take extra time. We have an ops meeting every week and we try and keep that under an hour. But then once a month we extend that ops meeting and we brainstorm on topics, things we want to dive deeper in. What if this? What would it look like to do this? And where some bigger decisions are made.
Yeah,
And that seems to help us.
absolutely. And anything that you can measure ongoingly is going to get better faster than something you measure once a year.
Yeah, for sure. But there is a pro to that. You can't be fearful of what you don't know sometimes. But then
Um,
again, you can be fearful of it.
and then it'll kill you by surprise. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't like I like knowing.
Yeah, no. Knowledge is power. We all know that. What else you got, Candace?
Well, you guys have touched on this a little bit, but this Q1 2024 is a unique one in that we're in an election year. So I thought this
Yes.
was a really great question. Someone asked, we have expansion goals for 2024 and it's looking pretty positive so far. But I've been told by several people that making big decisions and business moves in an election year is a bad idea. Do you agree? Is this true?
Martin, I can't wait to hear your perspective on general election years.
Well, this is what's going to happen every 4 years, right? Every 4 years, half of the political class is going to tell you that the economy is absolute shit and you should hang on to your money, and the other half is going to tell you that shit's looking up, that things are going to get better because we're in charge, right? And it just doesn't matter who it is; it'll just flip flop like that forever into
So
eternity, right?
So as
So
far as that information filtering down and affecting the business world, what have you typically seen
yeah,
election year? Because that information obviously does have an effect.
the
Who wins out?
the most interesting thing about that is that if you go by the most commonly agreed upon known economic measures, right? There's about 6 economic measures that everybody agrees, looked at together, give you a good economic picture.
Like
Okay.
groceries, dry cleaning, alcohol.
No, those are not there for some reason. They don't make it quite there, but there's some that address it. Okay. So you're talking about the economic measures that people usually think about is unemployment. They talk about the inflation rate. They talk about the number of new housing being developed, the consumer optimism index and confidence index, and that's the one that affects what you were talking about, and the domestic product or GDP. So if you take all of those things, you can create a very well educated sort of view
Okay.
on the economy.
So let's go back. So let's can we talk about each one of those really quick and access in our area
Well, actually, I was
where
going
we're
to tell
at?
you that you shouldn't do any of that
Okay.
because even again, even the most well versed economists will tell you that you take those 6 things and you can maybe establish a good or bad assessment of the economy. But even
Mhm.
within those 6 things, there's some that are completely based on the perception of the economy. A consumer index is a perception thing,
Right.
right? So even if your unemployment's low, your GDP is super high, inflation's on the trend down, right? Which are all things that are happening currently, but
Buildings happening.
there's
Mhm.
plenty of that, but the consumer confidence is right,
Consumer confidence is down, but frickin' the parking lot at Costco is packed,
right, and that's the thing. Neither
and
of
Amazon
those
packages are flooding the
fly
doors.
flying out the door, right? But neither of those economic indexes by itself is going to be good enough for you to make an assessment. So when somebody says, "Is it as a Main Street level business?" Right? We're not talking about the big guys, but as a Main Street level business, it's like I don't want to make decisions because it's an election year. It should be more about like what about your specific business is, if anything, affected by some of this stuff, right? There
Mhm,
are some Main Street businesses that are affected by super low unemployment rate, by
mhm,
super high unemployment rate. Like they
mhm,
are affected by the, I mean, if they're related to real estate at all, by the amount of inventory
mhm,
in place, right? So they
mhm.
will be direct things that you can measure. And
Mhm.
hopefully by then you have created a relationship with some of those metrics where like you can actually say, okay, that one affects me. I have a client who was importing glass from China, right? And after that, after the pandemic and the little traffic jam that we had of all of those huge containers, I was just like sitting in the Panama Canal. We knew that the year following was going to be a tough year to create like
Mhm.
enough of an inventory of all the products. So
Mhm.
we had to adapt, right? But like
Mhm.
you take one measure like that that is directly correlated to you. So to answer the person's question, it's not a bad year to make decisions. Is a year where you have to navigate through more shit in order to make a good decision,
And
right?
we are talking to people that have navigated through COVID. So, you know, election
Most
year
of us
versus
have, right?
COVID,
And some people didn't make it.
and some people didn't make it. And there was a lot of financial support in different ways
Some,
that
yeah.
helped us get through it. Um, but we have been through worse.
Yes. And again, election years are they're a lot more about the uncertainty than there are about the actual difficulty.
Right.
And that's where you have to navigate as a small business owner, right? So talk to somebody who knows about it. Find out the specifics that directly affect your business, right? And also take into consideration that there are certain amount of that percolates into the general public, right? So if you sell a
Mhm.
direct to consumer product, and that
Mhm.
direct to consumer product,
Mhm.
it's considered a luxury item.
Mhm. Mhm.
A low confidence index could potentially affect you, and you
Mhm.
have to get creative, right? You have to find out how to talk
Mhm.
about the value of the thing versus how to talk about the price of the thing.
It's more information. It's information gathering so you can pivot and be creative.
Sure, and
Yeah.
and and that should be the approach for this. The approach should be not like this blanket relationship with
Yeah.
election years are bad, so we're just going to try to stay in our cocoon as much as we can. It's going to be more about, okay, there's just more information to look through. We need to find the right one for us.
Is this is kind of an off the wall question, and we've talked about this before, but I'm going to pose it now because you said in your cocoon. Is status quo ever an okay strategy for a business?
Yeah, I would say there'll be occasions where it is, right? There's
I
going
mean,
to be,
overall, you want to grow. I mean, people, you hear you got to be
if you're not
growing or
growing, you're
dying.
dying. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, is that a little extreme and dramatic?
A little bit, because for me, if you're
Thank God.
surviving, you're surviving, right?
Yeah, no kidding.
I
Life
think
is
I've
tough.
mentioned, I think I've mentioned this book before, but Simon Sinek wrote a book,
Mhm.
rewrote a book, really, didn't write it, rewrote a book called The Infinite Game. And, there's a lot of really cool examples about what an infinite game is in that book. But basically, the message, the way you should get out of it is that if you're in business or if you're like in embedded in your passion, the game
Mhm.
is staying in it. However, you do that, right? As long as you stay in it, you're okay. Right? You can continue to try, you can continue to modify. But if you quit, that literally means you're no longer in the game, hence you've lost
Mhm.
the game, right?
Mhm.
So quitting is the only thing that I would say is just flat out bad,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that you shouldn't know when to stop a particular thing. It doesn't mean that. It just means that there's a lot that will happen or should happen before quit is an option, or before let's not do anything is an option.
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
see, you can stay status quo, but status quo means, okay, this business runs on a 5% month over month growth. Okay,
Mhm.
that's status quo. So
That's
as long
status
as we
quo. Mm,
stay growing 5% month over month,
mhm.
that's good, right? We can
Mhm.
survive this, whatever that is.
Mhm.
So yeah,
Mhm.
I would say with caveats,
Mhm.
yes, status quo can be a valid approach.
I think it's a timely question. What else do you have, Candace?
speaking of timely questions, everyone's favorite part of Q4,
Hmm.
taxes. I know you guys aren't tax people. We did get some tax, like very specific, like you should seek out your CPA for that one. But I chose this question because I think the question itself is great, and there's a conversation to be had there. But the behavior around this question is perfect head and heart conversation. So
Perfect.
I'm curious what you guys have to say to this one. I'm getting ready to file taxes for the first time as a business owner, and I'm terrified. I've only ever known the world of W-2 filing and getting a tax return and money back. So I've been extremely avoidant about getting my documents together for my tax preparer, and now I'm facing having to file an extension. Any advice
Oh,
on how to handle the stress and fear of business taxes?
Oh my God, just know that it's a pain in the ass. Get a good accountant for one. And the thing about taxes as a business, it's so funny because if you want to get loans and you want to lease a property, your bottom line needs to be positive. But if you're just trying to avoid taxes, you want your bottom line to be negative. And so it's this game. And so if you are paying taxes, it's a good thing because you're making money, right?
yeah,
And then your accountant, if that's the case, will set you up with quarterly payments for the next year so that you're making chunks as you go along and hopefully, not super surprised. But yeah, tax
100%.
and the IRS just, I don't know, it just makes us like, "Ugh,"
Well,
shiver.
well, this is one of the few countries in the world where you have to work for the tax man, right? You have to do all the work for them. But I
In other
digress.
countries, you have to die for them,
It,
and
it,
it's
it-
the
okay,
death tax.
not nearly that bad. But so here's the interesting point that I want to make to whomever asked that question. You've never in your life have gotten money back. Okay, I really want everybody to stop saying that. It's such a fallacy. Like, oh yeah, this year I'm getting money back. No, you overpaid in taxes, right? When they take them off of your hard-earned paycheck, they take them off, right? And they take more, and then you file it. You do the work for the tax man. You file everything, give them all the details, and then they go, ah, yeah, right. We took a lot more than we needed to take from you. Here's that money back, right? They held it for you. They were nice enough to hold your money for a whole
At
year
an interest.
at an interest, and
How
who knows for what else, and then they give it back to you, right? So you never.
however, it's a great savings plan that you're not quite expecting as well. And
Well,
everyone
and
says, "Keep your money," but if you keep your money, as long as you're putting that away
as long as you don't
monthly and
spend it.
automatically and not spending it
Yeah. Well,
anyway,
I
side
wouldn't
note.
go as far as saying it's a great savings plan, but it works for some people to know that they're going to get a little money back, right? But hopefully that's the case. Now, when you're a business, what happens is you usually go through that transition of your first time where you're like, it's all coming into you, and there's a chance that because it was your first year, you didn't do quarterly filings, right? You just didn't.
Yeah.
And that's not the end of the world either, right? There will be a tiny little bit of a penalty assessed. And it's not going to be crippling. It's not going to be
Well,
crazy.
and you're gonna have probably more expenses than you normally would.
And in the first year, your chances are that you're not going to have a ton of profit to have to pay taxes on. And that right there is the big difference between being in business for yourself versus working for somebody. When you're working for somebody, it doesn't matter if you're spending more than you're making or if you don't have
Mhm,
enough,
mhm,
you're still paying the tax on that. You're paying
mhm.
taxes on the top level. When you're a business, you start paying taxes on the bottom level. You
Great analogy.
start paying taxes on the profit, right? You start paying
Mhm.
taxes on the money that you kept after doing whatever it needs you needed to do for your business, as long as all those things that you did were legal and
Mm.
allowed, right? Again, I'm not a tax guy. I will never be a tax guy, but those are the general knowledge things about it, right? And then that money that's left over is what you will be assessed a tax on. right? So the good practice is to
Yeah.
around second year start figuring out, okay, well, what is likely to be my profit? I'm going to make quarterly payments on this, right? So that I don't have a big tax bill. That's the only reason to do it, because if you make a profit, you will have a tax bill. That's it.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, you will have. Now, again, there's a lot of other things at play because it's the
Mhm.
business and then the individual, and there'll be things that as an individual the government allows for you to. So there's a chance that if your tax bill is, you know, $3,000, but you have a couple kids, like that will be a wash, right?
Right.
But that's the point. The point is it wasn't a savings plan when you were an employee, and it's not armed robbery when you're a business. Actually, it's pretty much better on
It
this
is better.
end.
That's
It's
one of the
better on this end.
benefits is
It
the
is one of the
write-offs.
benefits,
Mhm.
right? So you want to just plan for it. And like Natalie said, find somebody that you can work with. This is a advice that I have given to a lot of businesses before. You want to have a good relationship with a tax preparer for sure, right? But as a business, especially as you start seeing profit, be willing to pay a little more for somebody who's a tax planner, right? Somebody who can help you plan around the way your business is structured, around what you're going to spend money on, around how and when you're going to bring people in, etc. To create a sort of a runway for how you're going to structure your tax liabilities.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ways for that to be worth it for you.
But
Right? That
but I would
investment is going to be
yeah.
worth it.
Yeah, but I would say as a new business owner, keep in mind that keeping your books positive and paying some taxes
It's a
is
good
more
sign.
important. It's a great sign. It's a sign of winning, and you want that.
It's a good
If you're
sign.
paying taxes, it's a good thing because you made money.
Down the road, the other thing that's going to become important is the sort of the tax maintenance, right? So when you start doing the things like, well, I'm going to have a capital expenditure at the end of the year to like level off that because I'm going to need that stuff anyway, etc. But then later on in the stages, there's the moment of like, okay, well, if we're going to exit this business, right? If that's going to be part of
Mhm.
it, right? Then what I need to start showing both in my P&L and in my taxes is that I actually make money on this thing, right? There's the
Right.
business and there's what I get to keep out of that business on a yearly basis, right? It's called seller's discretionary earnings. That is what the a combination of the actual money you keep plus the benefits you get out of the business that somebody
And the
looking to
draws.
that
Mhm.
somebody looking to buy your business can go, okay, if I multiply that by three ish, that's where I get my investment back, right? So it's worth it to have that business and buy that business at three times what that person keeps every year.
Yeah, for
And then
sure.
there's a lot more other considerations. We can talk about
For
those
sure.
some other day, but that's the game.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So don't panic on the taxes. Get some help. Filing an extension is not the end of the world. It's
Yeah.
actually
Totally fine.
totally fine. Also, it doesn't mean that you filed the extension and now you are gonna file at the very last day of the extension. It basically means you couldn't file it by the 15th of April, and you can file your extension, do the work, and file it as soon as you have it.
They just give you a leeway. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Nice.
Nobody's
Yeah.
gonna die
No one's gonna die.
or go to
Yeah,
jail.
or go to jail.
Nobody's going to jail. Not yet.
All right. So here's a great question on I think you guys kind of touched on this a little bit, but I'd really love to hear both of your thoughts on this. I think a lot of the listeners would too. Our business had a phenomenal Q4 and holiday season, but sales dropped significantly for January, and it's been hard to not be in a panic mindset ever since. How do you recommend we keep the holiday Q4 momentum going in the new year?
I feel like we kind of went over this one a little bit.
Yeah.
It's being proactive, knowing, if that's the seasonality of your business. So being proactive, knowing that January is going to be the slower month, and using that time for other things and keeping the ball rolling, really.
Right. I
Yeah.
mean, what I would say is if you're a Christmas tree farm, that makes sense. Uh, but if you're not, right, the
Yeah.
type of approach that Natalie takes is a good idea, right? If you say, okay, look, I don't know why, but everybody holds on to their money a little tighter than January, right? So if that's the case, first, create promos, talk to people, right? See what they would be interested in doing. Uh, Pre-sale sometimes works for certain types of businesses, right? You say,
Mhm.
hey, if you buy now, you get this discount, right? But there's like events that go throughout the year. Like there's a lot of ways to engage with your customers about, and again, this is going to be another theme. You're engaging with them about the value they get from your business, not about the price they pay for it,
Mhm.
right? Like,
Mhm.
what is it that they get out of interacting with you?
Mhm.
And if you can
Exactly.
enhance that or make it more accessible or make it more timely and more permanent, that's the way to go, right? So
Yeah.
you want to start thinking ahead of time that if Q1 is going to be slower, which logic tells you that is a chance, there's a chance it will.
Yeah.
What are
Right.
you doing to try to prevent that?
Yeah.
Um, the way the question is worded sounds a little bit like we were too caught up on the woohoo, Q4 is going great. Then everybody took their break, and now there's like nothing in place for
Yeah.
Q1 for maintaining
Diamond
Q1.
marketing. That, you market, 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 then all this business comes in, then you focus too much energy on that business yourself, getting that business taken care of,
Right, there was no plan.
and then it goes down again. Yeah.
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 So, great discussion. We'd love to continue to hear your comments on things and questions around it. We'll still answer anything. So if you're listening later, you can still chat in there. You can always send us an email, always send us a message on any of the platforms. We
Yeah,
talked
wherever
a
you're
lot.
watching this, put your questions in the comments and we'll get to them. Candace will like scavenge through all of them and find your question and put it to us by next show.
Yeah, for sure. And we've been talking a lot about money today. So I'm excited for our next podcast, which is Wednesday, April 17th, noon. So the lunch hour. So that's the
Right
third
after
Wednesday.
taxes.
Right after taxes. Yes, that'll be very great timing. So Becky Klaba is going to be speaking to us about our perceptions of money and how that gets in our way. So we all have a perception of money, the way we grew up culturally, what we were told, how our parents dealt with money, and it definitely plays a role in our decisions personally and in our business. And so she's got some really great insight on that. And she's an absolute delight. You will love her. So excited about that
Yeah,
for
we all
sure.
have a relationship with money, so
We all have one.
that's something that needs to be accessed at some point, right?
Exactly.
You need to know what your relationship with money is.
Exactly. And that's what Becky does. She specializes on your relationship with money. And does that, is there a shift that needs to be made or not? And with most of us, there is a
There is.
shift. Yeah.
Yeah.
And great example for me is that and Martin, you know this, that when I went to go get a nice car, my first nice car, I didn't want a big label like a BMW or Mercedes because I didn't want people to think that, oh boy, she's doing well, or who does she think she is? So I kind of went under the radar luxury with the car I chose. And, but,
What did you get in the end?
I got an Infinity.
Ah, right.
That engine was fabulous. So anyway, there's a whole perception about that
Right.
and a relationship with money that, is in that story.
For
So we'll
sure.
talk about that.
Great.
So what is your relationship with money, Martin?
Well, I mean, my relationship with money has evolved.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
I had a very pervasive relationship with money. I
Yeah.
had this relationship with money and people with money as they were all rotten. They were all bad,
Right.
right? So
Right.
as long as that perception was in place, I was never going to be above water. Right? It
Yeah.
was always going to be something that was difficult for me. It was always a
Yeah.
struggle. And, I've done a lot of things that pay well and that, but I was always managing to keep my expenses right below that, so that I was never one of those accumulate money type of guys, and by extension a bad person. Right.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
that was my inherent relationship with money.
yeah, and I can see that. It's like, the judgment that we have in someone, driving an Acura versus Mercedes, it's all different, but yeah, it's definitely it's so interesting. So
Yeah.
interesting.
I
So,
l- I like nice cars.
yeah, I know. Nice cars are great. Nice cars are great. There's nothing wrong with them.
Yep.
Well, thank you everyone for listening in today about Q1 and it being election year. Um, the takeaway really, it seems to me, is first quarter is always a little wonky, and look at your industry and your business
Yeah.
specifically in the election year. Don't
There's a
go ahead.
there's a social media post that I always make around the Q1 thing, and it freaks people out, but it has a very specific approach. It says, "Relax. There's nothing under control." John Hall, good to see you, my friend.
What a cute little baby.
You baby.
You should post that.
I do every Q1.
Okay,
Funny
okay. Well,
enough. Yeah.
yeah, that's
But
hilarious.
yeah,
That's
relax, guys.
yeah.
Whatever it is, you should control the controllable.
Mhm. Yeah, it
Right?
sounds good. And if
Great.
you're not relaxing, talk to your peers, talk to a business coach,
Talk to
because we
somebody.
all get to that "oh shit" time frame.
Talk to somebody.
Talk to somebody. Yeah.
All right.
Talk to your cat.
We'll see you in a couple of weeks.
See you guys later.